Right, we're nearly there. As we approach the final formal session of our two-day conference, we're keeping our international focus with a panel discussion on the future of payments, turning our attention outward. We'll explore what Aotearoa can learn from global trends and how we can lead the way in shaping future payments, or the future of payments. So I'm pleased to welcome back from day one, Carol Grunberg, Daniel Jonas, Luke Wilson and Jane Retimana to the stage. If they could come up now. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, okay, why not? Thank you. Oh, that's so much better. Nectarios just mentioned that don't talk about trends that we can look at because, you know, just do your own thing. But what do you think the trends are that we can look at? Anyone?
So actually, I'm going to quarterback a little bit about what Nick said, but I'm going to kind of go a little deeper. I would state that if anyone has an innovation department, there's a problem, because inherently, I think the role of every individual is to be innovative in their current job, right? Because nothing changes, or nothing stays the same, rather. And so I think one thing that's really important is I've led innovation groups before at City as head of innovation, Northwestern Mutual, so forth. But by having that, it implies that, you know, business as usual is good enough, and it never is, we know that. And so I think one thing to think about is then how do we train our staff and our organizations to constantly be thinking about what is around the corner to be able to stay more competitive. And so I think, you know, we should figure out how to breed innovation within our DNA as organizations. That is our obligation, I think, to shareholders and employees to continue to stay alive and keep the doors open. So that's kind of one of the things that was top of mind in these last 2 days.
Wow. So I think I'm going to follow on to what Carol's just said. When you're innovating in an ecosystem, it's not the case that everybody has to do the same job. There are the people who start things. There are the people who get people talking, who get the idea to catch fire, that have the early conversations, that convene the conversations, bring people together, the right people in the right room. That's a much longer area, a much longer period than people think. And then when you actually finally start investing serious money, that's development money. It's not the same as money that you're investing in a product that is similar to something that's already been launched where the risk has been taken. It's just different. You can't do all of that within one place. And you have to think about how your ecosystem as a whole does this. There is a role for banks and there is a role for fintechs. They don't do the same thing. Just be really clear what the handover points are. And the other thing is, be clear who the people who sit in the middle and convene the conversation. They may not be the people who fund it, but you also have to think about the funding. And the funding doesn't necessarily have to come from the people who are launching the final product. It just doesn't need to work like that. That's actually something, strangely enough, that we've got reasonably good at in the UK with our science base. We have an organisation called Innovate UK that particularly funds early stage stuff that commercial organisations just won't have the appetite for. But you've got to think about it as an ecosystem.
We're going in sequence?
Yeah.
I took a few things out of this week, and I'm probably going to talk about the way of doing something rather than a payment trend, because I think there are a lot of people out there that know far more about the payment trends around the globe, and we've covered a lot of those. I mean, we heard about the railway tracks in the US not being wide enough to support getting the shuttle to the moon. We heard about the UP team presenting a 100-year plan to the board, and the board going, what the hell is this? We heard the CEO panel talk about the importance of sequencing and prioritisation. And all of that tells me that there does need to be some level of a process that can help this market, creating a vision, creating a strategic plan. And by no means do those two things solve all of the execution problems that every market faces, but it can be used as a guide that people can get behind potentially. So I think the trend that is happening more and more around the globe is that there's more collaboration in creating that vision and that strategic plan, and maybe that's something that could help this market.
You're probably sick of hearing from me. I know I've been moderating, but I've been chipping in here and there, and I've totally lost the plot on where the question started, so I'm just going off piste here. But what can we learn from what we've heard in the last few days? And it's why are we in this? Actually, this is a Jane Ritimana opinion. It's not to be attributed to my employer or any media in the room. Please don't quote me. But why are we in a pissing match with all these other countries about who's first? What does it mean to our people here in Aotearoa? And I kind of keep, that's where my mind's gone. Why do we care if Australia's ahead of us in open banking? Or why do we care that we're behind in some innovation somewhere else? Are we looking after New Zealanders? Are we serving the people? And I think over the last couple of days, and actually one of my colleagues said this morning, and we've been to all the Payments New Zealand conferences, obviously, and she said, every conference, it's about what we could do, this amazing innovation and this amazing this and that and the next thing. And she said, but this one's been about what we should be doing. And I think if there's anything I can take away from the last couple of days, and even when we started with that kaumātua from the Hokianga, what should we be doing for New Zealanders? And so that's been resonating with me, and I think we should learn from others. But why do we want to keep saying we're behind, we're ahead? What are we doing? And there's lots that people are doing, but what should we be doing better? What should we be just getting out there and supporting New Zealanders, like what Sasha's doing, how great was We Money? There's lots, even the banks in New Zealand, but I just, I don't know why. We'd love to beat people at sport, but why are we, I just don't think it takes us anywhere. So, sorry, Mike, I don't know. That's not on the question sheet, but that's where my mind's gone.
No, look, that's fine. And also not on the question sheet. This is my opinion, Mike Roberts, not Payments NZ or MBR, but certainly not TV3. But, maybe one of the things we can learn from outside is more about us. And I thought Nectarios made a good point at the end there when he talked about our community. And I feel a real sense of community. We've got lots of them, but we've seen a few of them on display this week. And I just wonder if that's what we tap into.
Well, I'll start and then you can all share. I agree. And that was beautiful, Nectarios. How do you make money? And I don't know if any of you have followed Reriata Makiha, the kaumātua from the Hokianga that spoke yesterday. But if I was in insurance, I would have that guy, because if he can save farmers from getting flooded by when the pahutaka was flowering, because he understands this mātauranga tukuiho, this ancestral knowledge of living in the land and all of these effects. If I was in insurance, that guy would be at the top of my list to be listening to. And in banking, you lend money to farmers. If a farmer's not listening to all the inputs that they can get about how they look after their livestock and their farms and where they need to be doing, it's actually meaningful. And I think it's actually, you can make or save money, make money. That's where it comes into it. And I think there's a lot of listening that we can do. And not just listening to, listening to old wisdom and having those fresh ideas and listening, to our young people and melding that all together and then finding the way through. And I think, all the voices need to be at the table. And I'll let the rest of you speak, but I'm just going to call you out, Jane. Great name, Jane Horan, Dr. Jane Horan. The people I think, and we're going to try and do more of this at Payments New Zealand, Dr. Jane Horan down there, sorry I'm pointing at you, is a social anthropologist, and she's been doing work with community networks Aotearoa. They did the Better Banking study that looked at not-for-profits in New Zealand and all the issues they face with their banking. But actually we need to bring people like Jane into these discussions that we're having at an industry level, and we have to, because we can think in widgets and technology, but people like Jane think in people. They think in sociology. They think about human behaviour, and I've heard a lot of that over the last few days, and I think it's really beautiful. And I think that's the challenge: make sure everyone's in the, people are in the room, humans, and I've loved that about the last few days, hearing that come into the conversation.
Now,
that's my rant over.
Don't feel like we need to go online here. This is the last session of a 2-day conference, so go wild. Just jump in and say whatever you'd like to say if you want to say something.
So I'm going to jump in because this is not the event really that I was expecting. And it started in a way that made the rest of the event entirely different. It started from a different place. And therefore, I ended up, before coming up here, when I was thinking about what needs to be thought about, I found two, I don't want to use the words because I won't pronounce them correctly. Those top two things there, if you read those out, those sound about right to me.
He maramatanga tō tēnei whetū, he maramatanga tō tērā whetū. Each star has its own luminescence or presence in the sky. Beautiful.
So that's what's going on here. This is what you're starting from. You're starting from somewhere that's different from everywhere else. And the things that it sort of made me think about is about, well, what really needs to happen? You've got a huge opportunity here. Right? I'm hearing a lot of people going, oh, we're very behind. Do you know what? I've also heard the word leapfrog. Like, stick with the leapfrog idea. Some of the unique things you have here come from your situation. You have a self-contained environment. You have a national sandbox. Think about being a national sandbox. It's not that you haven't even done that already. You've done that already, at least several times. And what you do have that I've seen is a potentially unique model for stakeholder public stewardship to actually use what you've got here to test stuff that you can't test anywhere else. Come down here, plug your stuff into New Zealand and see if we can get it working at a national level. You could do that.
I think we can often beat ourselves up and focus on our weaknesses. So to your point, focus on the nation's strengths, and the strength was pretty obvious over the last 48 hours, wasn't it? I think I'm just going to offer a slightly counter view. You do have to be realistic to a degree. You need to think about the characteristics of the nation and how you'd stay connected globally, but that doesn't mean you can't do both. What it can mean is that can really help you prioritise what you want to focus on. So if collaboration and your sense of community and belonging is as strong as has been depicted here over the last couple of days, fantastic, build on that. That's a strength, focus on it. But you do have to be realistic with some stuff that's going on. I mean, we also heard about the fact that you're a trade nation and got a pretty good rundown on that this morning. So there's some other things that you need to stay across. But, identifying those few things seems to be a significant challenge and opportunity for New Zealand. I mean, I think your strength is that. Your kryptonite at the same time is the fact that you're a small nation and it's going to be hard to invest in so many things in payments.
When I was a kid, I had asthma, and I remember the first time I went scuba diving, I was terrified. I couldn't breathe, right? And I didn't think I could do it, but I did it, and now it's one of my favorite pastimes. But every organization that I've been at that has done something extraordinary, and I've been fortunate to be at some really amazing organizations, has always launched something by walking on the other side of fear. Always, right? And one of the things that has made them really successful is the fact that they empower conviction And that is really, really important. And I think it's really tough when we're in banking or financial services in general because, right, we've got consent orders to deal with, we've got regulations to deal with. We have to be safe to safeguard assets, right? And so in many ways, it's like, well, to do our jobs, we have to be safe, we can't take a risk, but yet we owe it to, right, what business are we in, right? What are we doing? We owe it to our constituents, to our clients, to actually constantly take a risk and to have conviction in something and move forward. And so I think part of, again, going back to the DNA of every organization, every employee needs to have innovation as a mindset, and this is what we need to train for. We train for sexual harassment and compliance and risk and security. We also need to train for constantly, how do you have a growth mindset as an individual? And also, how do you embrace fear and run towards fear? Because that's how you create something new. And so, again, this is, I think, one of the things that is a really fine balance that we all need to think about is having conviction, empowering conviction in our teams and ourselves and our organizations, because otherwise it's just mediocrity. And I agree with you, Daniel, 100% that, you know, the only way, I mean, how much time I spent in India and China is unbelievable, but leapfrog, because they had nothing, they were behind. So what do? You can only leapfrog if you come from behind. So it is a glorious opportunity to have greatness by like stepping to the other side and not overthinking it and just have conviction and empower people.
I'm not moderating, but I've got a question for Carol, if you don't mind, right? Well, you know, like when you've worked in...
Fine.
You know, Carol, when you've worked in India and in China with these big companies, you know, like the Chinese have this 1,000-year plan for themselves. Like, what's that? What kind of does that look like in our type of society and a Western side society? Because they're always heading to something.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So having lived and worked in both India and China, there's this adage that I learned: India grows in spite of the government, and China grows because of the government, but they both grow in different ways. China, culturally speaking, I have never worked in any place quite like it, because everyone knows the North Star, everyone goes after it, right? And like ant group, Alipay parent, right? It's ants, right? You carry 10 times your own weight and you go together. And that is very symbolic of China and how they operate, whether it is ByteDance with TikTok, and it is Tencent with WeChat, and it's Ali, Shane, Temu, whoever. They are empowered to take risks over and over and over again. And also they, you know, President Xi in 2018 put a governmental mandate, we've talked a lot about AI, but he put a governmental mandate to say every public and private entity must have an AI, right? An AI program that permeates everything they do. So you've got an entire nation of 1.5 billion people constantly, daily, their job is to learn about AI. They're not no wonder they're the first country to regulate it, right? Because they've been thinking about it for 6 years and we're talking about it. And so I think it's, again, one thing that's been interesting is that they have this it's a 100-year plan, actually. They have a 100-year plan, but they know that to meet it, they constantly have to take risks every day against a shared vision. And they're very good at it.
Thank you, Carol, and good question, Jane. In fact, if you have a question, more than welcome to ask a question. We've got another couple here. I kind of feel like we've gone over some of this stuff, so has anyone got a question out there they'd like to ask now of our illustrious panel? Okay, here's one we prepared earlier. What would you have expected to hear more about? And what does this mean for us in the payment space moving forward? What are our superpowers? What are our challenges? How do we leverage these to build a digital payments ecosystem fit for future?
From my perspective, I think you covered the key trends. For me, this is more about how. What I've taken out of the conversation is about how and what's next, not so much what you put on the shopping list. I think there's a fair few things on the shopping list. I'm an ops guy, so I'm sort of more about execution. So you need to balance that out with the strategic vision and the smarts. But I think, clearly in other conferences you're going to hear about stable coins, CBDCs and so on, and refreshingly we didn't go into that too much at this conference. So I think the big payments items have been covered, and I think a lot of the conversation has been focusing on how you develop that execution plan and what's right for this country and the role that it also plays for its local people and globally.
I sort of semi-agree with that. I mean, I would have liked to hear more about tokenisation because it is that important. And it's going to change things in ways that we can't even imagine. There's a lot of people going around saying, oh, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. No one really knows. The question is, what do we have to do in these kind of situations? I think one of the political speakers earlier, I can't remember which one, said something about, I think it was the minister actually, he said that our job is to facilitate the conversation. And I don't actually agree with that. I think the market can do what the market does. I think sometimes the market gets into a tangle and it takes somebody to cut through and actually bash a few heads together and go, here's how it's going to go, because you've not been able to sort this out from yourself. Sometimes you need somebody to step in and do that.
Circuit
not
breaker.
all the time. Circuit break, exactly, Luke. So that's important. The other thing I would say is, you've got to think, we've all got the same problem, actually. I've come here from the UK, Luke's come here from Australia. There are certain problems that we all share, particularly in the open banking space. We've all got a smart data challenge. We've all got an A2A challenge. We've all got a fraud challenge. It is about time we actually put our rather smaller heads and budgets and all of these things together and actually perhaps acted a bit more like ants ourselves, but working together in that kind of way, because the people that we are in working in the same ecosystem as, the people we're expected to compete with, have global footprints and global budgets and all the money in the world. So we've got to think differently to get around that.
I know one of the streams talked about it, but I think because we're not a G20 country, we're missing from the G20 roadmap work. And I know you, Luke, Australian Payments Network, and I know you, Daniel, and obviously the US and that, they're all part of the G20. So it is a bit of a challenge for us to be part of those global, that kind of global harmonisation that's going along. And I do think it's a real gap for us down here in New Zealand. Like, there's massive working groups going on. They're looking at all sorts of things on the roadmap that affect us, like identity and cross-border harmonisation and all sorts of things. So, we're going to have to get out into the world, whānau, and really connect with that stuff, because I have a real FOMO that we're missing out, but not us as payments people, but those, the Tracy Hopapas and Jennifer Henry and all of our exporters, because if it becomes expensive to trade in New Zealand because we're not part of some of this harmonisation effort in payment systems, economically we've got a few issues, but I don't know what that looks like. But I think that is a bit of a gap for us, and you three will know way more about this than me. But the post-smartphone era is super interesting. Looking ahead, what that looks like.
There's a Māori kid, or I say kid, he's in his 20s in Wellington, who's just got first spark in a nuclear fusion project he's been working on, which is massive. I think and he's done it in a way that's never been done before. But this is our pioneering spirit in New Zealand, and someone's just sent through a question here. How do we restore our pioneering spirit and look at the long game in terms of keeping pace with innovations around the world? Should the government be involved? I'd be interested to hear your opinions of that.
So New Zealand is incredibly fortunate because you've got two things going on that most of the world does not. If you put the Maori aside, does anyone know what the average age of a New Zealander is?
I do.
44.
Yeah.
44 years old. Okay, who else is 44 years old in the world? The US and Europe. That's the average age there as well, 43 to 44. Okay. Now, over the next 15 years, what does that mean, right? The majority of their wealth will have been accumulated, and then they're gonna start retiring, and they're gonna start looking at wealth decumulation, which is a completely different aspect of lives, and they might need that wealth to reach another 30 years, right? Depending on mortality rates. So you've got this going on, right? On the other side, you've got the Maori, which we talked a lot about them yesterday as being employees, but actually they're your consumers, right? And if you look at Southeast Asia, Philippines, average age is 24. Indonesia, it's 28. South Africa, it's actually 18, but they're younger. So you've got this population of not looking at them as employees, but looking at them as your consumption. Most of your goods and services that will be produced over the next 10 to 15 years will be consumed by them. So you're in a place geographically where you've got both sides of the equation where most of the world really has one constituent, right? You're either aging or you're growing and then you're decumulating your wealth, or you're growing and you're gonna be a consumer. So you guys have this amazing opportunity to address both sides of that. And by doing so, it's providing a window to the rest of the world how to handle, right, these aspects within their own countries. And that is unique to New Zealand. No one else could boast that they have both those things going on at once. And I don't know if we're looking at that, but it's a sweet spot, I would say, for New Zealand.
That would make a fabulous story. And well, if you go to nbr.co.nz tomorrow morning, you'll see a story about this very thing. I've titled it "The Sausage and the Triangle" because the Māori population demographic is a triangle, and the non-Māori European origin population is a sausage. And the rest you'll just have to see. But it's fascinating. Okay, but you're right. I mean, it offers enormous opportunities.
The second part of the question, should the government be involved? Well, I think the Minister certainly provided a view on that this morning. So just get on with it. And you asked the question, what is it? But I think the answer to that question is possibly, depending on what the industry does and what the private sector can get going themselves. And possibly the government could be that circuit breaker. But you've got to have a willing participant there.
Yeah, the government are involved. They're here, and I think we're getting to know them. I was talking to Marty. You still here? Marty from ComCom. I was just asking him how many people he knew at the last payments conference to how many people know him now, and I think there's been a steady queue up to to chat to him. But we are literally all in this together. He waka e kinoa. So it's not really that the government have to. That they've got a job to do, and industry's got a job, and then the market has the job because they're the ones that service the people of the land. And I think, Aotearoa has a pioneering spirit. My Pākehā tūpuna came here as settlers. They came all the way from Britain and on a tall ship. My Māori tūpuna came here on a waka. We are pioneers. We're number 8 wire people, so we can definitely get it done. And I feel like we just, there's enough bubbling under the surface. A lot of people leaning in now, so I think we're restoring it now, and hopefully take it all away.
So I think a lot of this, I completely agree. I think a lot of this is about taking the challenges in your own way. So you've got the CDR coming through. Think of that as a springboard. One thing that they haven't got anywhere, as far as I can see, is a genuine spirit of self-sovereignty. That's something that you could look at here, and there's a first to be done there, which isn't going to be done in countries where people are very happy to do what the government said, right? We are going to have to deal with it sooner or later, because our data is not ours. We may say it is, but the onus is on us to go and ask the people who've got it to tell us what they've got. We may not know they've got it. We don't know where our data is, who it's looking for. A lot of that is going to have to be sorted out if we're going to have truly smart data. Data can't be smart if we don't know, if we haven't got our own handles.
Nice.
Okay, time to wrap it up, and I might just go through all of you and ask for a 30-second challenge to lay down to the audience. You guys can pick the order, but if you've got one on the top of your head, take it away.
I don't understand the question.
Okay, well, not a call to action, but a challenge. Well, I suppose it is a call to action. A challenge to the audience, 30-second challenge to the audience. Before we have you back in 2 years' time for the next Payments New Zealand conference.
Do something in the next 3 months that you're terrified of doing.
I would say that if you are going to try and create a vision for payments, be willing to compromise. You're not going to get the basket off the ground if the scope's too big. The balloon won't be able to lift it. For the greater good of the country, and there seems to be a willingness to collaborate, I would say just be willing to compromise as you try and drive towards that vision and that strategic plan.
And for me, I think what I would do is avoid anything which has a slogan on how we're going to move forward, right? Because people will love these things. People, you can you can brand it, you can put it out there, all of these things. But at the end of the day, this is what somebody thinks is going to convince people. And what really counts fundamentally, eventually, and this is something from my culture, is what is true and what is false. Everyone knows, really, well, everyone doesn't know anymore. That stuff is being destroyed, right? It's about time that we focused on that more rather than how it looks and who's in charge and has it done this, that and the other. And actually, what Luke's saying is also part of it. You've got to prioritise it. It's got to be feasible. It's got to be achievable, right? Let's be real.
I was trying to remember this really cool saying, but I can't remember it, so I'm just gonna ruin it. But get on board, get in the waka and start paddling. But if you don't, but get out of the way. If you don't want to, sweet as, just stay on shore. Fine, get in a different waka. But we've got it. We are making progress. Let's keep making progress. But if you don't want to be on that waka, sweet as, go build your own waka and paddle that where you want it to go. And I think
I have one here.
Oh,
that second one there. What about that?
He tangata takatahi takahi. Oh, my bad. He tangata takahi manuhuri. He marae. Pewhoo. Where did you get these from, mate?
Well, I've been learning.
A person who mistreats his guest has a dusty marae. Kia ora.
Well, that's pretty hard to top, isn't it? I'd like to thank our wonderful panel and for coming all the way to New Zealand to be with us. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to be here, your expertise and knowledge. And we wish you very, very well for your travels in the future. Thank you.
Thanks,
Kia ora.
Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Ooh.